Hi, I'm Femi Oke, and you're in the stream.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Today, a UN investigation on human rights in the United States.
Is poverty preventing millions of Americans from exercising their political and civil rights?
For somebody to have to come from the United Nations to figure out a solution to a problem that the United States should be handling is really it's really sad to me. I mean, because they're saying they want to make America great again. This is not making America great again.
How is it that such dire poverty exists in the world's largest economy?
A UN Special Rapporteur just finished crisscrossing the United States in an attempt to answer that very question. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 41 million Americans are living in poverty. That's more people than the entire population of Sudan. In Los Angeles alone, some 55,000 people are homeless. One homeless enclave, Skid Row, has just 9 toilets for roughly 1,800 people. And in the southern state of Alabama, an intestinal parasite, once thought to have been eradicated in the U.S., is thriving because of poor sanitation.
Joining us to talk about this via Skype from New York, Philip Alston. He's the UN Special Rapporteur on Poverty and Human Rights, who just finished his fact-finding tour of the United States. In Los Angeles, Steve Richardson, also known as General Dogan, he's an activist and community organizer with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. And right here in our studio, Catherine Coleman Flowers. She's a social justice advocate who founded the Alabama Center for Rural Enterprise Community Development Corporation. And that's an organization working to address the lack of sewage disposal infrastructure in Alabama's rural Black Belt. It's good to have you here, everybody. Catherine, when you heard the UN was going to be heading around the US looking at extreme poverty, you did what?
Actually, I wrote a letter. I did it with a partner of ours, the Human Rights Law Clinic at Columbia University. We wrote the letter and we sent it to Dr. Alston's assistant to invite him to come to Alabama.
There are going to be many people, even inside the US, who are going to be saying extreme poverty. What does that even mean?
Well, you know, I grew up in poverty, and as growing up in poverty, I know what it's like, and I think that a lot of people just assume when they look at poverty, especially in rural communities, they don't understand it. They look at poverty generally through an urban lens. And living in an area where, you know, we had outhouses at one point, people didn't have enough food to eat, you know, we didn't get, people are used to going shopping. You know, I wore a whole outfit for the whole school year. You know, may have gotten 1 pair of shoes a year. That was the way I grew up. Some people are still living like that.
Philip, when you were heading around the US, what were you looking for? What meant extreme poverty for you?
Well, there are official US government definitions. Someone living below a certain number of dollars per year, but that doesn't capture the sort of situation a lot of people are in. There's been a book called Living on $2 a Day, which documents the extent to which a pretty large number of people actually have about $2 in cash each day available to them. And if you don't have access to toilets, if you don't have access to clean water, then you're likely to be living in poverty.
You know, Philip, we got this tweet from actually several people when we tweeted out the report, which includes the line, the U.S. is one of the world's richest countries, but neither its wealth nor its power is being harnessed to address the situation in which 40 million people continue to live in poverty. Sam on Twitter says, I thought only developing countries had such challenges, and he's not alone there. Philip, what do you think is the most surprising thing that came out of your reporting?
Well, this is a very dramatic moment in American history, in fact. In most developing countries, the discussion that I have is, do you as a government have enough money to be able to provide even basically decent living standards for your people? And the government will often say, no, we don't, we can't afford it, etc. The United States government is just about to pour $1.5 trillion into funds for the extremely wealthy. At the same time, it's announced that it's going to be cutting back on welfare and healthcare. So it's just stunning that the money is there, but the priority is given to those who absolutely don't need it, and the situation of those who absolutely do need it is going to get much worse.
General, I want to bring you into the conversation because you know an area really well in Los Angeles called Skid Row. The Guardian newspaper went on the trip with Philip and took pictures and spoke to people. I'm going to show some of those pictures and you'll see some more as we continue through this conversation. Where would you take people to tell them what it's like to live in Skid Row? What would you show them?
So most definitely, first I would take you to over there where LA Live is at, where the Lakers is at, where you see these $5 million condos and lofts are being built at. You see people sitting out on the streets, drinking lattes with the umbrellas and the chairs. You see the manicured dogs walking down the street. And then just a throw stones away, you see Tent Village. You know, you see complete sidewalks that just have rows of tents as far as you can see. You see streets that are filled with people pushing shopping carts. You see people, you see poverty. In other words, you don't have to go to rural Alabama, you understand me? You can come right here to sunny California, one of the richest cities in America, and you see poverty. You see extreme poverty. Because just like Alston was saying, the political will is just not there.
So Americans know about Skid Row. This is not a shock to them. Why are they shocked about poverty elsewhere, General, in the States?
So, I mean, just like Alabama, I mean, we're talking about how people saying that, they shocked to see poverty in certain parts of America. Well, I'm here to tell you that as long as you're poor, you treat it the same no matter where you at, whether you in rural Alabama because they dealing with the hookworm down there, or you in sunny California, we dealing with the hepatitis over here. So people are treated the same. You poor, you have nothing. United States lead the nation, in almost every category when it comes to depriving poor people. And so you see when we walk down Skid Row, when me and Alston walk down the street, you don't have to go, to you think some third world country. Right here in Los Angeles, you have conditions that are worse than third world. We don't have basic things like trash cans and bathrooms and stuff like that. So poverty, is right here in our face.
I hear what you're saying there. There's someone who I think might agree with you. This is Stephanie Land. She's an economic and justice writer, and she says that poverty may not be what people expect it to be or to look like. Here's what she told the stream.
There are many different shades to poverty. I mean, there's extreme poverty, which, is important to point out because the living conditions are absolutely horrendous. But there are also families who are at different levels of employment. When I was a single mother who worked full-time, I still needed food stamps, Medicaid, childcare assistance, several things just to help me get through the month. Work doesn't save you. Your work only gets you so far.
So, Catherine, I saw you nodding there. Can you explain for people, because that might be a surprising thing, that you could be working and still be in poverty?
I know a lot of people that are working and are still in poverty. A lot of these factories are not paying people living wages. The utility bills are extremely high. One of the things that I learned when I returned to rural Alabama to work is that the poor people were paying the highest amount of money for utilities. There's one family that I met recently who lives in a mobile home, and they said that on a regular basis, their light bill for their home for power is $800 a month. Wow. That's a lot of money for poor families. Some poor families are living off $700 a month or $800 a month. The fact that most of us in this country, at least where we live, are one step away or one paycheck away from poverty. If I miss a check, I could end up in the same situation. I could end up homeless. There are people that are choosing between buying medication and eating because they don't have enough money. Their children go without. We're constantly doing things for students that are in the high school that need uniforms, the things that people take for granted in other places. Most people, when their children play football or basketball, you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to buy a uniform for them. But if you're in a poor school, that's a different situation. So yes, there are different shades of poverty. And I've met people, even in Alabama when Dr. Alston was there, people that are working for companies that 1 month they qualify for food stamps because of they didn't get enough hours where they could, not have to worry about that. So yes, in this country, I think the travesty is that we're always putting on a show that doesn't show the reality what a lot of people are dealing with every day.
Phil, I've got a picture of you here. This is when you went to Alabama and you're sitting listening to people's stories. Have a look on my laptop and you can see Philip there in situ. What were people telling you, Philip?
I just want to come in and I'll answer that in 1 second, but just
Sure.
to come in and reinforce what Catherine was saying. I spoke to a number of people women who work for Walmart, and they told exactly the same story, of course, of being unable to subsist adequately on a full-time Walmart salary. And so they were getting food stamps even while working full-time. Their representatives estimate that Walmart employees get something like $6 billion worth of food stamps each year, which is effectively a subsidy from the government to Walmart. But the bigger point is that what we're seeing in this economy is the growing precariousness of many jobs, not just Walmart. When the government talks about the need to get people off welfare and into jobs, that's great, and I'm all in favor of that. But we have to acknowledge that many of those jobs will not pay a living wage because the conditions are not there, the medical insurance doesn't exist, the hours are not set, and it's the gig economy which is going to generate ever more jobs that need to be supplemented by some form of social welfare.
Let me show you one gentleman. This is Aaron Thigpen. We showed him at the beginning of our show. He was talking about how he lives. This is the outside of his house. And Philip, he showed you his plumbing system. I'm going to say system in sort of air quotes because it wasn't much of a plumbing system. And this is one of the biggest issues with people who are suffering from extreme poverty in the US. Have a look at how Aaron's plumbing system kind of works.
The small white pipe here is your main water line coming from the highway. And the two large white pipes are running from raw sewage, straight pipes from the house. So the raw sewage will have somewhere to go from here. And as you can see how it builds up when it sits in one spot. And you got your main water line here and it might have a hole in it and then get some of this bacteria in it and everybody gets sick all at once.
How is that possible? 2017, United States of America. How is that possible, Philip?
Well, there's a very interesting contrast. There's a very big campaign going on these days in a place called India. And that is a campaign to encourage people to use toilets.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, the government is systematically installing or assisting with the installation of toilets across the country, a major national campaign. When I was in Alabama, when I was in West Virginia, I asked the leading health authorities, how many people in your state don't have access to proper sewerage facilities? And they looked at me and said, don't know. And I said, well, what's your plan? How are you going to make sure that you cover the whole state? Sorry, no plan. People can do that for themselves if they want to. Yeah, but in a place like Alabama, it can cost up to $30,000 to install a septic system. No poor person can do that. So they're going to keep living as they are. I guess that's right.
And there are very real, dire consequences, of course, to not having a good septic system. This is Mia Monique on Twitter. She says, okay, let's fix the hookworm problem in Loudoun's County. This is a first world country. She goes on to say, I'm more than sure that more situations are occurring within the state as a whole. Septic systems are extremely expensive, especially in that area of the state. USDA, or the government, offers loans, but the process to get a loan, an income loan, is long and tedious. Too many hurdles to jump through. Catherine, can you relate to what this person is saying?
Actually, we've had situations. I've had a U.S. Senator to tell me that USDA sends money back to Washington from Alabama. So a lot
Because
of
it's a surplus, and so what it's extra that was not used?
They're not spending the money to address the problems. The other problem that we found that Philip didn't get a chance to see is that people have paid for these septic systems. They fail and it runs back into the home. So we've had it come back into people's bathtubs, into their sinks. It floods their homes. Those are failing septic systems. And what happens, what we've seen is that the inequality is so dire that the government will give money to businesses to provide the type of treatment that's needed, but they won't do that for homeowners. They leave it up to the homeowners themselves who can't afford it because there are environmental issues that factor into whether or not these on-site systems work. And they know that the technology doesn't work, and we're trying to find solutions to that.
Jen, I'm going to bring you back in.
Go
ahead.
Same problems right here. We're having some of the same problems here in Los Angeles. There's clearly a dirty divide because we have around 3,000 homeless people that's living directly on the streets that have to share 5 toilets within a 24-hour period time. And so the will is not there by the politicians to even come in and build basic infrastructure, understand me, for people to live on a daily basis, right? And so we facing communicable diseases now, like hepatitis A, pretty much some of the same diseases that's being coming up in other parts of the country, like the hookworm. That's in Alabama.
General,
so
can I explain to people what hookworm is? Because you brought this up a little bit earlier in the conversation. I want people to just pause and take this in. This is what a hookworm looks like under a microscope. This is what it looks like when it's in your intestine. And this is how it all happens. Let's start with the eggs in the feces. They mature in the soil, and then those little worms end up getting back into your body because, as you saw from Aaron's plumbing situation, the sewage is right out there in the open and it goes back into your body, and so on and so on. The circle continues. And this problem with hookworms was thought to have been eradicated around about the 1980s, like gone from the United States, but because of extreme poverty, we're seeing cases of it again. Sorry, General, please continue.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just make that point about, it doesn't matter, I've been saying earlier, whether you in rural Alabama or whether you in sunny Los Angeles, people is being treated basically the same just because they poor and living in poverty.
I wanted to share one other example from someone online. This is MF in China, who is not from the U.S. but travels to the country occasionally. He says he recently came back and was noticing how he sees the country getting poor. He says, I met a lot of college-age people who clearly never had proper dental or orthodontic care growing up. It must have been too expensive after their parents lost jobs in the late 2000s economic crash. I'd never seen teeth like that on Americans before. He goes on to say, it's sad because bad teeth are sort of class-marked in America. The idea that decent dental care is out of reach is shocking. So I actually want to share a picture. And this might be hard to see for some members of our audience. This is via The Guardian and their photo essay and where they followed you, Philip. And this is a man who couldn't afford dental care there. This is in The Guardian article. Patient who came into the clinic needing all 30 of his teeth to have root canal surgery. Philip, can you explain to our audience who don't understand how this could happen?
I must say I like the comment from the guy in China who says that teeth are class marked, not just in the US, but in the West generally. In other words, if you have good teeth, you're classy. If you have bad teeth, you're bad. And the fact that there is no dental care that is provided for example, by Medicaid, once you are an adult, you're not entitled to any dental care courtesy of the government. You have to go to an emergency room. It's the only option that's available. And what happens, of course, is that people turn up for jobs and they open their mouth, at which point the employer says, oof, you've got bad breath. Or, I see you've got 2 front teeth missing. I don't think we can have people like you working in this job. Sorry. And so the cycle of poverty just gets worse because you can't afford any dental care. You start to suffer headaches and illness that we all get with dental pain. Eventually it shows and you're unemployable. Meanwhile, governments provide no assistance, even for the poorest.
This is all fixable. None of these issues that we've talked about so far in the last 20 minutes or so, none of them do not have a solution. Some of the work that you're doing, Catherine, is directly aiming at how do we fix this. For instance, not having a septic tank, that is an offence in Alabama, but you've been stopping law enforcement from arresting people because they can't afford to pay the fines and they get thrown in prison and then it gets even worse. What else are you doing?
Well, one of the things that we're doing, we're partnering with different organizations from around the country to try to find on-site technology that works. We want to shift the paradigm. Actually, what we're looking at is trying to create the technology where one can go to a hardware store and buy it like you buy an HVAC system and get a technician to install it in one's home. So we're working with Duke University, we're working with Columbia University's Human Rights Law Clinic, but we're also working with their School of Engineering. We're working with Engineers Without Borders here in the United States. Right. And we're working with American Standard, who has come to partner with us to try to find technology that works, that's affordable, and that works in our soils. And I think that it can eliminate some of the inequality that people in rural communities are dealing with that have to deal with on-site septic systems.
We got this question here from LA Can, the organization of one of our guests. They write in, can you ask the panelists what they believe will end the violence, the cycle of violence and poverty in the U.S.? And there could be an answer here. We just got this on YouTube. Henry says, this is all very embarrassing to the so-called world superpower. So Philip, I wonder, in answering that earlier tweet, is part of this shaming public officials and governments?
That's what one would have thought, but the tax cut combined with the welfare cuts seem to suggest that there is no shame. So I'm not sure what the solution is. Hopefully one has to start educating the American people to let them know exactly what the situation is. We're talking about 40 million people living in poverty, as you mentioned earlier. That's a huge amount. And it's very far from the sort of stereotype that the average government official talks about when they talk about a lazy black family somewhere who's ripping off the welfare system. Well, I'm sorry, the welfare system is all colors, all people, and 40 million of them. And they're all living in degrees of misery, and that could be changed overnight, as the Congress has shown with tax reform.
One of the things that Philip says, General, is that it is possible to eradicate poverty in the United States. There are very few issues where people say that with great confidence. What's your take on that? You could actually get rid of poverty if America wanted to.
So my take is that, I mean, America continues to parade herself around, you know, as being a nation of equality, you know what I'm saying, and being a nation, you know what I'm saying, of goodwill. But we already know that she's one of the biggest human rights violators, you know what I'm saying, on the global planet, right? And I don't see no real commitment at this point, you know what I'm saying, from America to end poverty. Because I just see the regular day old kick the can down the road type mentality with all the politicians. They know exactly what's going on. A lot of the politicians that's been in office, like Mayor Garcetti, you know what I'm saying, has been in office almost 16 years. You can't deny, you know what I'm saying, what's going on in front of your eyes. You're driving past it every day. You got to drive past 50 million tents to get to City Hall. You can't deny that the conditions of living on the block. You know what I'm saying? The health department is talking about it, you know. And so for you to just keep on
so General,
doing the same
you don't believe it's possible then?
No, I don't believe they have. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I don't believe they have the political will right now to end
no
the dirty
political will. General Dogan, thank you. Philip Alston, thank you so much. And Catherine Coleman-Flowers, we really appreciate your input today, talking about extreme poverty in the United States. We will continue our conversation always online. Thank you to our community for being part of it as well. #AJStream. See you soon. Thanks for watching.